The BBC keeps trying to tell us that they're not a representation of the Brexit-hating, Boris-despising London left-wing metropolitan elite. But their actions on a daily and weekly basis suggest that's exactly what they are and what they will remain. Remain unless we continue to call out their blatant bias. So there were two incidents the past few days that were particularly egregious and suggest the corporation continues to take its critics and its audience for fools. First, the Beeb hired as their new presenter a little-known bloke called Matthew Stadlen. Now, Matthew, he isn't a big name or particularly talented. He hosted the Graveyard Shift on LBC for a couple of years, and as far as I can see, these days is largely a Twitter irritant. Actually, he applied for work on GBNews before we launched and didn't get the job. So not a broadcaster you'd think the BBC would be particularly keen to hire. Until, that is, I tell you about Matthew's politics. You see, Mr Stadlen is as left-wing as you get. He's an avowed hater of the government, of Brexit and of Boris Johnson. He believes the Tories are racist. And he's so craven in his support for Labour that he's recently talked about running for the party as an MP.
Extraordinary that there are still people out there who would vote Tory under Boris Johnson. If leaving the EU was such a good idea, does anyone know why Jacob Rees-Mogg is crowdsourcing Brexit opportunities? To be clear, Keir Starmer seems like a decent, sensible man. Boris Johnson's government is one of the worst Britain has ever had. The Tories should be voted out. We cannot have another 5 years of Boris Johnson. If you've had enough of Boris Johnson and Nadine Dorries, it's probably time to vote Labour.
Yeah. So he's the man who the BBC thought should be an impartial presenter for Brits on BBC Radio 5 Live, a news station. You couldn't make it up. He had been offered the shifts, announced his new gig on Twitter, and even claimed that he was all of a sudden going to morph into a David Dimbleby-style impartial broadcaster. It was only after a massive outcry over the fact that that a man, I guess, who's so deeply political, that he thought could provide impartial coverage of politics, and that was so ludicrous that the BBC withdrew the offer. They just don't get it, do they? Meanwhile, Nick Robinson, one of those folk who claims to be impartial, suggested he was anything but during a broadcast of Radio 4's flagship Today programme. In a blatantly politicised bid for a gotcha moment during an interview with Boris Johnson's Chief of Staff Steve Barclay following the Sue Gray report, the former Beeb political editor incorrectly told his millions of listeners that a government cleaner called Emmanuel Gomez died of COVID after, quote, being surrounded by people who were routinely breaking the rules. Listen.
At least one government cleaner instructed to keep coming into work during lockdown contracted COVID and died. His name was Emmanuel Gomez. One of his colleagues was sacked while isolating, although the Prime Minister kept telling us that it was impossible to distinguish working from partying. Cleaners probably know the difference.
In fact, Mr Gomez didn't die of COVID, but rather hypertension of the heart. That's according to the official coroner's report. Only he didn't even work at number 10 Downing Street, but was actually a cleaner at the Ministry of Justice. So while his death was, of course, tragic, it was deeply immoral of Nick Robinson to invoke it as part of the coverage of the Gray report. Sure, he apologised because he was wrong and because he was caught, but he showed a desire to bring down the government and the fact that that desire will blur the editorial decisions he makes. No wonder a Whitehall source told the Daily Mail it's a total humiliation for Nick and just the sort of cheap and nasty, overdramatic journalism that has ruined the Today programme. And Rebecca Ryan of the Defund the BBC campaign added, are there no depths to which the BBC will not sink in order to try to unseat an elected Prime Minister? There is no balance at the BBC and seemingly no shame. Just think about this for one moment. I did over the weekend. Is there any BBC presenter you can think of who doesn't harbour these lefty anti-Brexit views? I don't think so. I can't name one. In fact, since their departure from the BBC, the likes of John Sopel, Andrew Murray and Emily Maitlis have all used their newfound editorial freedom to express personal disdain with Boris and the government. Not that anyone really had any doubts about where they stood after years of biased coverage on BBC News.
Evening. Dominic Cummings broke the rules. The country can see that, and it shocked the government cannot. Tonight we consider what this blind loyalty tells us about the workings of Number 10. When it comes to excess deaths, Britain's currently a world leader. Is that really something to be proud of?
By the way, I was thinking over the weekend that from the moment the BBC dropped its daily COVID doom tally at the start of the Ukraine war, talk of coronavirus in the UK has virtually disappeared. So much of the hysteria and fear was stoked by the state broadcaster, encouraging unnecessary testing and constant terror. The Nadine Dorries ordered review, ensuring the BBC is complying with its editorial standards, including impartiality requirements, cannot come soon enough. The BBC is bad for Britain. It's deeply biased. Why the hell should we keep being forced to pay a licence fee simply to watch any television?